Hi everybody and welcome back to another video. Now, it's a very unusual one, this one, because it's just an idea that kind of sprung to my mind when I was on holiday last week about how certain stories are told within film that may not be authentically true as we see in documentaries, but also capture the emotion and the heart of everyone around the world and do it in a more theatrical way, while also giving us that sense of pride and joy of the people who have achieved what they've achieved within sport. And that's the purpose of this video, because I'm going to be talking about some athletes, not in particular order, who I feel should get their own biographical drama, because some of them have already had documentaries released in recent years, and like I say, it's the novelty and the theatrical aspect of the biographical drama that creates more global audience, I would say, in my opinion, because of how films work compared to how documentaries do. So I'm just going to run through a list of sportsmen and women who have been valuable assets to the world of sport and who I think should get their own biographical drama because of their story leading up to it and the legacy they have established afterwards. So the first one I'm going to start off with is Dame Kelly Holmes. Now, I remember watching the Olympics back in the early 2000s. I think it was Sydney 2000 or Athens 2004, in which I remember she became this global star. And I just remember watching Dame Kelly Holmes and thinking to myself, this woman is a machine. And, you know, just what she could do on the track was just amazing. In many ways, a lot like Jessica Ennis-Hill and what she achieved later on. But I think where her story would be good as a biographical drama is not just what she did on the track, but also her life before and afterwards. Before, she had an army career, and that would have been a good avenue to explore as well, in terms of why she went from that to becoming an athlete, and also after retiring from the track, her struggles with her sexual orientation, having recently come out as gay. And I think that's something that's really important for today's generation to understand and learn about. So I think Kelly Holmes, as much as I really liked her as an athlete when I was young, I think she's underrated and underappreciated, really, because I just don't think people truly understand or comprehend the legacy and the achievements of what she has compared to a lot of other people in the Olympics. So yes, I think Dame Kelly Holmes' story would be an interesting one to explore. Now, I think another one that would be good would be Michael Schumacher. Now, I know that we've had a number of documentaries about the real Michael Schumacher and his career and all those things, but I just think sometimes the theatrical aspect of the biographical drama is something that would be celebrated in an even more glorious way in film compared to documentary, despite the potential historical inaccuracies. I think with Michael Schumacher, he's arguably the greatest Formula One driver of all time, and just everything that he did for the sport just, you know, totally changed everything, really. And he won loads of championship titles and records, although some of them have either been matched or broken by Lewis Hamilton. But I think his story and his rise to being arguably the best of all time would have been a great story. And not to mention, his younger brother Ralph Schumacher was a Formula One driver at the time as well, so I think exploring that rivalry, in many ways a bit like Venus and Serena Williams, that's something I think would be good for a biographical drama as well. And not just everything that happened in the car and on the racing track, but also his tragic skiing accident in 2013, which has left him in comas, an almost impossible route to recovery given everything that's happened to him. So I think it would have some very, very distressing and emotional drama in many ways, a bit like $1 Million Baby back in 2004, because we know that film is about a female boxer from a very poor background who aspires to be a fighter, but then when tragedy hits when she's in the ring, she breaks her neck and then there's devastating consequences. So I think from a film point of view, a story about Michael Schumacher's career and also the aftermath involving his skiing accident would be a very engaging and telling story as well. A third one that came to my mind as well was Sir Bobby Charlton. I think his story is one of the most inspiring I probably ever heard of in sport, and it's not just because, you know, he's a Manchester United legend. I might be a bit biased saying that because I'm a Manchester United fan, but I just think because of everything that he went through in his young career and what he went on to achieve as a player, I think that's something that is, you know, it's celebrated, but it's not exactly, you know, shown often enough, I don't think, personally. And I think with film, that's what you can do, because of course he was involved in the Munich air disaster. He was with the Busby Babes, he survived that, rebuilt his career again. He was in the World Cup winning squad with England that year where he won the Ballon d'Or, and he went on to win the European Cup, or what it was called at the time, with Manchester United, and that same year got third place in the European Championships with England. So I think it's a really fitting story that really builds up to a tragic incident in the Munich air disaster, to him rebuilding his career, having gone through such trauma in his life, to then go on to achieve arguably one of the biggest things that he could ever achieve as a football player. And I think it's amazing what he's achieved, I really do. And I'm not sure who would play him, but I just think his story is just marvellous, particularly throughout the 50s and the 60s. And, you know, his later life, he's become an advocate for Manchester United. I just think he's just a real inspiration to British sport and just the world of football in general. And that's why I think I'd love to see a film about his time as a player throughout the 50s and the 1960s. Now, an athlete who I find is massively underrated. I don't think anybody really truly understands the lengths of what this person has achieved throughout his career and what he had to do to get there. And that person is Eddie Hall. And I know a lot of people perceive strongman as something, you know, like it's a bit of a drug sport, and, you know, it's people taking steroids and, you know, all these things to become stronger. But I just think the emotional story that Eddie Hall went through to achieve what he achieved, you know, the 500 kilo deadlift and also winning the world's strongest man in 2017, that's something that I don't think he gets near enough credit for. That's, I think, because, like I said, the people's perception of world's strongest man and just the general strongman sport. Even though personally, I will admit, I never really watched it when I was young, but I became a big fan of Eddie after that incident and when he did win the world's strongest man in 2017, and he beat a guy who's actually much bigger than him, and he lifted half a ton off the floor. Half a ton, which is just an insane level of strength, and just his determination and his will to do that. He was willing to die, basically, to achieve what he did by lifting that deadlift and also winning the world's strongest man. And I personally think Eddie Hall is a great advocate for somebody who has a passion for something and is almost willing to do anything to achieve that, who is willing to go through all the different, you know, barriers and stages to get to his dream. And that's exactly what he did. And you saw that determination as well after he retired from strongman and went into boxing. Despite losing the fight, he still managed to do that. He managed to show people that, you know, the determination that he has. And I think a lot of people would follow suit. So I think Eddie Hall's story would be an absolutely fantastic biographical drama, and not just because of the strongman contests and everything that he won, but also the consequence of things that happened to him outside of competition, such as health consequences from all the eating that he had to do, everything that happened from his 500 kilo deadlift, you know, the blood from his nose and his eyes, his ears, the concussions and all of those things, the health consequences and the impact that it had on his family and friends. So I think that's something to really address, and that's what I think from an emotional perspective within a film would work really well. I'm not sure who would play Eddie Hall, but I just think his story is just so underrated and so overlooked, and I think a film would really showcase that. Now, this one may be glaringly obvious, but I've got to include Tyson Fury in this list because his comeback story is truly one of the most uplifting and inspiring that I think anybody has ever even heard of in the world of sport. Because Tyson Fury was a prolific fighter before his first hiatus, after he beat Vladimir Klitschko for the world titles, at that point he was at the top of his game. He'd won everything, and then boom, that was it. He just kind of went down this spiral, and then he found the strength to come back and achieve what he's achieved. It's just absolutely remarkable, especially after that first fight with Deontay Wilder. I mean, that 12th round when he got knocked down and then he suddenly came back up when nobody thought he would do that. That in itself is inspiring. They could just make a film about that. But what he's done since then is being a good advocate for mental health, and it's also really important as well because he ultimately showed just because he's 6'9" and he's a high-profile world heavyweight champion boxer, it doesn't mean that nobody can't come out and talk about their emotions and their feelings, because if he can do that, anybody can. So I think it's ultimately about the courage, and the fact that he had the courage to do that is absolutely amazing, and just his boxing story in the ring. And I think you got the best out of Tyson Fury after that first hiatus. So in many ways, maybe it needed to happen because you saw the best of him afterwards, in my opinion, especially after the 3 Wilder fights and also the Otto Wallin fight where, you know, he got cut really bad, and how he didn't lose that fight I do not know. And then he goes on to beat Dillian Whyte at Wembley, which obviously was only a few months ago, and Fury himself has said now that I'm retiring from the sport, that's it, I'm not going to fight again, although I still want him to fight Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua at some point, because that would be the cherry on the cake as far as I'm concerned to an absolutely fantastic legacy and, you know, an unbelievable career. Now, in terms of of where I think his story would be told in a biographical drama would probably be when he beat Vladimir Klitschko. That would be the starting point, and then most of the film would be him dipping a little bit and then going down to the lowest he did, and then the build-up would be the comeback towards the first Deontay Wilder fight and then the third fight. And it would coincidentally work as a trilogy of films about Tyson Fury's second career, because he did fight Deontay Wilder 3 times. So I think that would be a very fitting way to tell Tyson Fury's story in the world of film. Now there's another one I've got to add, which admittedly has been fueled by the coverage and the news about him recently, and that is Mo Farah. I've always been a fond admirer of his ever since he won Olympic gold in London 2012 and Rio 2016. He's a truly great advocate for world sport because he's just a great guy, and you could see that through his love for the sports and his love for family and just his personality. And I would just love to meet Mo Farah, I really would. And he's just a fantastic role model for all young athletes who want to do not just running but just in general, and to just be who you want to be in life. Of course, the documentary about him when he was younger, where he reveals that he was illegally trafficked into the UK as a child and he was forced into basically domestic serving. And just thinking about that, I can't even imagine or comprehend the horrors and the trauma that he must have gone through to be forced away from your family, flown across to another country with someone you barely know, to then be a slave. You'd be absolutely terrified. Then to go on to school and for someone to see the potential in him to go on to achieve what he has achieved, which is just amazing. In fact, the whole thing now with the story about him illegally being trafficked into the UK as a child makes his achievements even greater. He's earned my respect even more. And I think his story in a biographical drama would work in a similar way to how Lion was, because that was about a young Indian boy who ended up losing his family, ended up across the other side of India, and was later adopted by an Australian couple. So I think a film about Mo Farah's early life would follow something along those lines. And I think telling that story would be fundamental in teaching people how serious and how shocking and sickening the whole trafficking issue is in the world. But Mo Farah, though, has just showed that no matter what traumas you can go through when you're a child, you can achieve great things. You know, you can achieve Olympic gold, you can achieve world's strongest man in some way, you could achieve boxing, you know, world heavyweight champion, and just anything you set your mind to. So in this video I've talked about 6 great sports people and how their stories would be great for biographical dramas. Who do you think would play each of these sports people? Who do you think would make the films, and how do you think they would be structured? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you did want to enjoy this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell ticked so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everybody.